Buenas tardes, gracias. Hoy yo quiero hablar en los piedras metamórficos, y porque muchas veces ellos están adentro de los metamórficos, tienen la emplazamiento de depósitos minerales y a veces ellos son amigos y otras veces enemigos. Aprende con los exposuros, los exposuros de la piedra metamórfico en el suroeste del Cretánico norteamericano y el focus de mi habla con un puntada de point. Entonces, en esta parte del suroeste de Arizona está en un terreno, un terreno de extendido extremadamente, y también la extensión se pasa la frontera para esta zona Caborca en el norte de Sonora, y entonces el basamento precámbrico está relatado. Y eso son los son los grandes épocas metalogénicos. Y entonces hay un época muy viejo de origen precambriano que está VMS. Como se dice, un ejemplo es el depósito Jerome en Arizona. Proterozoic, sí, el Proterozoic. Gracias. Y este otro poquito de poco de estaño que está bien viejo también, más que 1 billón años pasado. Y los otros épocas más importantes para los depósitos metales son esta zona en el laramide de los porfíricos de cobre, y también la zona de epitermales y relatado con los volcánicos de la Sierra Madre Occidental. Y me quiero hacer en solo una reconstrucción de norteamericano y aprende en la parte más viejo. Un poco delicado este pointer. Y entonces cuando aprende la historia del cratón norteamericano en el proterozoico, solo estas 3 partes que están representadas del terreno Mojave, y está exposada en el oeste de Arizona y muy definitivo en California. Es más definitivo en California, pero también hay poco exposada en la barranca grande de los estados. Y entonces, esta es la configuración de aprender la conglomeración de la Cretón Norteamérica en esta parte del Cretón suroeste, que es tan importante aquí a México. Y la primer terreno que están fácil a determinarmente están el Yavapai Formation, y este es un Island Arc, y después tienen otro Island Arc, el Mazatzal, y cuando se aprende la subducción, esta zona de intrusivos con relación. Y después añadir el cratón Mazatzal y más plutónicos relativos, y también la creación de el bloque Greenville. Y en esos tiempos, adentro 1.5 y 1.1 es un gran poco de intrusivos y plutónicos que están con una relación de este epoco metalogénico de estaño, pero no es muy importante, pero esos epocos de granitos son muy, they dominate the exposure of the outcrops in many places. And so these plutonic sequences related to the Yavapai and the Mazatzal formation are a very significant component of the outcrop within southwest Arizona. And as we move forward, the pointer's a little finicky. Right around 1.1 billion years is where we get some extension related to the, having a hard time getting the exact slide to show where we see Caborca move. And it's related to relaxation after this Grenville event. And we've got several kind of northwest trending structures that we see become extensional domains. And I think this is very important to point out that our Jurassic Sonora Mojave megashear, which is a very ubiquitous terrain boundary, I believe it is, this is a crustal structural boundary which has been active for millennia and well into the geologic past as well. And so we have movement of the Caborca block into its more or less initial configuration right around at 1 billion years, and it sliced off a chunk of the Mojavian craton, as well as probably some of the Yavapai that had been heavily magmatized. So we're going to step forward just a little bit more, and then we will get right into Paleozoic time, and we'll start moving forward from the Precambrian and through the Paleozoic. So just some borders for reference, and we're going to step through the progression of southwest North America, and we see the Appalachian orogeny begin here in late Pennsylvanian time, and as we progress through to the Jurassic, we start setting up the new subduction off of the Pacific coast, and we've got some Jurassic porphyry copper deposits in Arizona, such as Bisbee, which are generated by these earlier arcs. And as the arc configuration stabilizes in Cretaceous time, that's when we really build this laramide front. And I guess it's also important to point out that, you know, we had an incredible change in convergence on the North American craton coming from the southeast relative to this position to directly from the west from the Pacific. And so just a very dynamic change, kind of a complete flop, or a complete reversal, I should say. And then we move forward into present time when we're about to switch over to extension, and we'll zoom in a little bit closer on Arizona to look at kind of what the immediate effects are of that. And so here we're at 20 million years. You can see we're at the kind of end of subduction and the beginning of the relaxation within western Mexico. We can see we've got the large volcanic pulse of the eastern Sierra Madre Occidental here at 20, and then as we step through to 15, we see it progress over here to the west. And it's also very important to point out that here right around 15 is where we get the main detachments separating from the southwestern part of the Colorado Plateau. And just looking at this figure, it kind of appears that we probably had some isostatic uplift up here, and talking about the isostatic uplift of the Colorado Plateau is a discussion for a talk of its own. For me, this kind of detachment zone right here in central Arizona is important to focus on as we look at this next progression at 10 and 5 million years. And after we have that main detachment, we really start extending the western core as we have the rifting along the Gulf of Baja really initiated. And as that rift moves from south to north, it's going to kind of come into contact with the transtensional strain component along the San Andreas Fault, and we get into a little bit of a triple junction action where we've got stress focused along that San Andreas corridor, and then also up the Colorado River corridor and extending into the Great Basin of Nevada. And so going to 5 million years before present, we can just see that this northern area of Sonora and southwestern Arizona are just being extended to an incredible degree. And as we move to this next slide, we've got a map here showing the domains of extension in western Arizona and northern Sonora. And all of these red areas, the bright red, is over 2.5 times extended. And so this extensional domain is, our metamorphic core complexes are exposed due to this concentrated extension within Southwest North America. And so we're going to talk about a couple of examples of mineralization that has been that is exposed now kind of right along the flank of this extensional corridor. And so the next question, a very common question, is what is a metamorphic core complex? And the easy answer is it's a mountain block that has metamorphic rocks at its core. And these metamorphic core complexes are the superficial expression of gently inclined normal faults that are occurring on a crustal scale, large-scale listric faults. And these minor undulations are then exposing our deep metamorphic complexes. Talking about the episodes again, we're just going to really focus on the laramide right here to talk about a couple of different examples that have been placed in different metamorphic terrains. First, we're going to go up to Chloride, Arizona, right outside Kingman, and the Mineral Park copper moly porphyry deposit sits right here. We've got some radial veins extending. There's a nice exotic copper deposit out of the foothills, and a project area that I'm currently involved with here to the west of Chloride, which is easily interpreted to be kind of the precious metal halo. We've got our copper moly core to the district, our zone of base metals, and then as we get more peripheral, we get into our zones of precious metals to the north and south. Going on to the next slide, I just kind of want to point out, this just shows a little bit more breakdown of the concept I was showing, where we've got the central core, our lead zinc regions, and then we get into our precious metals. And then the exotic copper deposit that's immediately to the west of the Mineral Peak porphyry copper is the Emerald Isle mine, which is a structurally controlled conglomerate-hosted oxide supergene resource dominated by chrysocolla, malachite, and a little bit of tenorite, I believe. And along with considerable zinc values. And I want to point out here that at Emerald Isle, our metamorphic basement complex, the Surbat complex, which is correlative to some of the older basement rocks out of the Grand Canyon where they've had more work done on them. These rocks are amphibolite grade, granulite facies gneiss, and so hornblende, biotite, tonalites to granodioritic in whole rock composition, and the level of foliation varies from very minor to very well defined. And my point of this is that these host rocks, or this metamorphic terrain package, does not have any preferential permeability zones, any internal kind of dominant structural controls. The foliation planes are not well defined, and they're not generally continuous over an extended range. And so therefore, I believe that, this exotic copper deposit was really limited to the weathering environment that was determined superficially just in close proximity to this porphyry copper deposit. And I feel that is important here. We're going to talk about another district. And so here in the Chloride district right next to Mineral Park, the Emerald Isle mine is a very minor resource that is currently uneconomic. And as we go over to to another district, we'll see how more favorable metamorphic host rock package can contain some considerable volumes of economically viable material in this exotic copper situation. So just zooming in a little bit more on the chloride district, we see that we've got the same concept that I've illuminated before on some other slides, and just kind of, I guess, was pointing out some more details. There's numerous significant deposits of economic importance here in the chloride district, and I guess the Tennessee Schuylkill vein system is important to point out because it shows no vertical zonation. It has 1,800 feet of ore zone from top to bottom, and it's lead zinc dominant, which it should kind of be getting out here into the precious metal halo, but precious metals are negligible in the Tennessee Schuylkill vein, and it's got a very profound vertical extent of mineralization. That 1,800 foot of mineralized ore chute doesn't necessarily fit with the context of it just being genetically related to the mineral park porphyry emplacement in my mind. The host rocks of the Surbat complex are correlative to this Mojavian province, and we just kind of see a progression showing these multiple island arcs, and where exactly the correlative basement units exist in their geologic context. And we are looking at kind of the oldest rocks exposed in northwest North America, and the correlative units that have had a lot of work done are the Elves Chasm Gneiss and the Vishnu Shale. And Vishnu is the god of preservation, and what an appropriate to give this rock when it's so old, kind of one of the oldest pieces of the North American craton. And then some detrital zircon ages in the Vishnu formation have been even more revealing, as some more recent research has shown that it could have possible origin from the Antarctic continent or Australia that was the far, far north side relative to the Laurentian mass. So in Chloride AZ, when we're exploring in an area of covered pediment that is this Elves Chasm Gneiss, there's not a whole lot of outcrop to work with, and the outcrop isn't incredibly revealing when it is there. And so we've got a prospective area defined by numerous historic mines. You can see the kind of project area just totally out in the flats. And so we use the drill to advance exploration as we do in most places, but surface geology has not been incredibly revealing at guiding things. Here is a sample from one of the mines on the chloride project, just kind of showing kind of the distinct diagnostic nature to some of the mineralization we're seeing, and I feel like this is just kind of classic intermediate sulfidation vein. We've got some clasts of low sulfidation or banded layered chalcedonic quartz with silver sulfide clasts, and then this is entrained within a massive calcite veins, or a massive calcite breccia, or a massive calcite cemented breccia, which is later then rimmed by a layer of quartz calcite veining, which contains pyrrhotite and coarse arsenopyrite. And so I felt like this sample was revealing in the fact that it shows the multiple kind of epithermal events that have been going on at the subsurface, and I believe we've kind of got a hybridized or multi-episodic emplacement of mineralization. And so pigeonholing things as a specific deposit type are not necessarily possible or helpful, and that's why it's always important to keep our interpretations open to new information. All right. Currently, we're going to be on our fourth phase of drilling, a round of core drilling planned for this fall, and then some more RC drilling in the spring, and I'm just not focusing on actual drill results here, but you're welcome to look them up under Rydell Resources, ASX listed. Current day map, just giving us a little bit more context. I don't think I updated this one. We're going to jump over here to Miami Inspiration, and so we're up here in the Mojavian province. We're kind of going to walk right over the Yavapai, and we're going to get down here into the Mazatzal. But our host rocks up here at Chloride are the Elves Chasm Gneiss, and down here in the Miami Inspiration, we've got the Pinal Schist. All right, and so as I mentioned, we were talking about laramide emplacements of mineralization, and so this is just a map showing the laramide igneous rocks in Arizona and northern Sonora. And so we're going to zoom in right here. And this is just an inset map defined by the blue square showing where the actual outcrops of Pinal Schist are in southwest Arizona. And we're going to focus right in here on this blob at Miami Globe. This is a regional geologic map with a breakdown of structures by age. And the guys at University of Arizona have just been doing a phenomenal job for like the last 10 or 15 years doing these palinesplastic reconstructions of porphyry copper deposits in Arizona. And we've had such incredible extension that we've sliced up so many deposits. And so if you can find a slice of a deposit and you figure out where it is in the deposit, look at the regional tectonics, you can search for the other pieces of the deposit. And so these different structural features are defined by color based upon age. And so work done by Mayer in 2008 was focused here in the Miami Globe district. And going on to the next slide, we can kind of see some of the different pieces that had been separated from all of these deposits. And so popped in a slide talking about some of the contained metals that are here, but we see we've got these northeaster trends of porphyry cells, and resolution deposit is just about right here, the Tinto BHP joint venture. And so we've got a northeast trending cell which has multiple periods of laramide porphyry mineralization, and this porphyry mineralization has also been in place at apparently different levels of depth. I would believe in laramide time, as opposed to saying everything from Superior all the way through Globe was in place at the same exact depth. I would say that maybe our depth of emplacement over laramide time changed slightly. I don't know, maybe I'm talking too much. I think it is important to point out over here, just the contained copper on this slide is well over 2 billion pounds. And resources in just over here at resolution, you know, we've got like 2 billion tons at 1% plus. Zoom in a little bit more on the Miami Globe district. The context on the north side of the district is comparative to the south side of the district. Just the topography is a little bit more intense down here, and so mining activities in the first half of the 20th century really focused on this area around the Miami Inspiration and Bluebird pits. And now we've got Pinto Creek going at full force over here just to the west. I think it is very important to point out that a lot of the historic mining at Globe Inspiration was not just focused on the disseminated porphyry mineralization, but it was the secondary kind of exotic copper mineralization within the surrounding Pinal Schist, which accounted for about half of the ore produced, and that's what went on to the big leach pads at Miami Inspiration. Looking at the Pinto Valley mine, we see that they have a mineralized porphyry, which is their main target. That's what they're pitting, but it's in place directly adjacent to the Pinal Schist, and so there probably is some decent secondary oxide mineralization here in this Pinal Schist, but it's not suited to their sulfide flotation circuit. So now I'm going to jump right down here to the south side of the Schultz Granite Pluton, where we've got another mineralized porphyry that was defined, or that was discovered back in the 40s and 50s and drilled out several times, and then project fell apart in the 70s with copper prices. I believe maybe it was the 80s when they really fell apart. And I believe the 80s was when they shut down all the Miami Inspiration operations. the underground developments. I believe that was 82. Anyway, looking at the south end of the district, we've got the same context as the north end of the district. We have a mineralized porphyry coming up and emplacing kind of right along the contact of this Pinal schist and the main Schultz granite body. The Schultz granite is a large laramide intrusive that is generally non-mineralized, but then later phases along the periphery are mineralized, and so those account for the production on the north end. Here on the south end, we've got expressions of hypogene mineralization here in the central corridor, supergene mineralization consisting of layered copper oxides, which are disseminated within the Pinal schist, and they are oftentimes controlled by this foliation as opposed to just structurally controlled, which I feel is very important. You know, this Pinal schist, when it is more towards the micaceous end member than the siliceous end member, it was previously a turbidite sequence, and so the internal whole rock composition kind of can be mapped on a regional scale, but that's something to look at further. But I guess the point is, when the Pinal schist is micaceous, it makes a good host for secondary copper oxide mineralization. And then within this area, and cutting across the contact between the Pinal schist and the Schultz granite, we have some mineralized shear zones, which show some high-grade copper mineralization, and could certainly be indicative of being sourced at depth. And so these are some definite drill targets to be, or some definite targets to be followed up on geophysically and then potentially tested by drill. But we are looking to analyze this project in a broad regional deep sense, as opposed to just focusing on the historic resource, which was drilled out in this supergene secondary oxide blanket within the Pinal schist. Looking at some more of the core, we can see that we've definitely got some myelinitic fabrics that are coming through some of these structural zones. And so I believe we've got shear zones that have been deeply emplaced, and we're currently seeing them near their level where they transition from ductile to brittle in some places. Looking just a little bit more at some of the other mineralization within the Miami Inspiration District, we've got the Van Dyke deposit, which is an ISL target, which sits directly underneath the town of Miami. Looking at some of the structurally controlled mineralization in the Pinal schist on the project, we have some good hypogene mineralization, quartz chalcopyrite molybdenum veins, some massive chalcopyrite with bornite, and then just a brittle shear zone, which is cemented with some chalcocite, this dark mineral. And also existing on the property, it's worth pointing out that there is a copper seep, which was exposed by a forest fire 2 years ago, and so sometimes it's good when the mountain burns. And I guess another thing I just want to point out is jurisdiction is so important, and especially with projects of scale such as copper, being in the right location is kind of everything. And this Copper Basin project is located Copper Bullet project is located immediately south of Miami Inspiration. We see north is to the left on this slide. But right here in Miami Globe, we have the Freeport smelter, and down here at Hayden we have the Ray smelter, and these are 2 of the 3 operating copper smelters in the United States. And so being within proximity to these processing facilities is incredibly important, although I feel like it is definitely worth pointing out that Capstone is not sending anything to this smelter or this smelter. It goes on a train over to China and gets smelted. And so jurisdiction is important, but it is certainly not everything, and synergy of operations, I think, is very important. And then I guess it's also important to point out resolution is right here, and the amount of infrastructure and refurbishment to statewide infrastructure going through this area is expansive. They're having to move all of the high power voltage lines. They're going to move the highway, they've got rail lines to move. The amount of infrastructure relocation going on right here is very impressive, and to see some other discoveries made within this triangle would really be great, because they've only got so much ore left at some of these places. But like here at Miami Globe, you know, there's several old deposits that are kind of just sitting there underneath the town unmined. And so there's definitely some low-hanging fruit to be had with the right perspective in this region as well. And then I guess I maybe wanted to make note that in between, so we're just talking about Miami inspiration down here, Chloride's up here. In between, we have the Yavapai terrain, which has a very strong VMS belt running right through the middle of it with Jerome, Mayer, and I guess Mayer is right here, where Arizona Metals Corp is currently drilling out a VMS that they've had some exciting results come out of. So we've got a VMS belt running right here. Baghdad had also started out mining the VMS deposits, and then in the 20s, and I guess in 1945 they switched all the way to the open pit cast mining. But it certainly is important to remember that we have this VMS potential here in central Arizona as well. Although this is much more directly related to the host rocks, these metamorphic complexes, as opposed to being a secondary effect. And so here in metamorphic rocks are definitely our friends, but I guess the right metamorphic rocks. And the main takeaway are the metamorphic rocks are friends or foes, and sometimes they're friends, sometimes they're foes. And gneisses can be very tricky, while schists can certainly be a little bit more helpful and definitely provide more structural control, in my mind, more continuity to aiding our geologic mapping. So anyway, questions? Thank you.